Wedding clothes. This story is in no way resembling the TV hit The Brady Bunch. There is no Marcia. Thank you, Lord. More importantly, there is no Alice, the incredible tolerant woman who put up with all the kids' crap and did all the things that Carol Brady been doing. I mean, come on. How could anyone with 6 kids really afford to live in housekeeper, cook, laundress, babysitter, and etc.? Michael and Kathleen sure as hell couldn't. Carol must have occupied her time getting her hair done and purchasing those taxi two-piece suits. Did she think she was Jackie Kennedy? So be very clear, the people in this story are real and probably right here. So be careful what you say. You may not recognize the person next to you. But there's a high probability that it is a McDuffkins or a McHolduff or just a plain old McDuffie. This story is of unconditional love. Family is all we have, and Michael and Kathleen have it all. Michael and Kathleen met in 1982 when Kathleen and her family came from Fort Stewart to see Barbara Marie, who had adopted Kathleen as her mother in 1979. You can ask her about that. It's a story in itself. Anyway, while visiting Habersham County, they had car troubles, and Barbara took Kathleen to Michael McDuffie's General Tire in Clarksville. Michael fixed the car, and that was that. Kathleen and the family went back to Fort Stewart. In 1983, when Kathleen's husband got out of the military, they moved to Habersham County. Kathleen got a job with Oliver and Oliver. Her husband found a job at Baycorp, now named something else, obviously. They lived in what they called the Star House on Pea Ridge, the old shore home. After 2 years, they bought a house in Baldwin, right by Baldwin Elementary. Meanwhile, every time they needed car repairs, they used McDuffie's General Tire. Sometimes lies unraveled. Both Kathleen and Michael were divorced in 1986. I'm supposed to allow for a moment of silence so that all of you have had a divorce and consider your own sorry situations. No need to share. Okay, have you wallowed in self-pity long enough? Good, let us continue. Kathleen lived in a government apartment in Cornelia and soon found out that she could not support her 5 children, even with 2 jobs, so availed herself to public assistance. She applied for welfare, food stamps, Medicaid, rent reduction, and financial aid, and went to college, entering Piedmont as a freshman in 1987. She was able to survive as a welfare mother and student. Michael was in a government apartment in Clarksville with his children. He was working in Catmart where he still works today, probably on many of the cars for many years. Michael was eventually able to move back into his house, own home in Clarksville, but none of that is particularly important. Now listen carefully, this part is more important. Michael and Kathleen began dating in the spring of 1986. When I say dating, do not interpret this as dinners, movie, miniature golf, or other traditional dating activities. With so many children between them, real romantic dating was an unattainable luxury. So they spent time together with their children, and sometimes it wasn't easy. Mostly they just hung out together, the children playing until they were tired. Then one of them would back up the car and ride home. Camping was something they could afford, though, and Sea Lake was a summer favorite. This was way before there were bathrooms there, but oh well. The children were in heaven, playing in the sunshine and water all day, and hanging out by the fire until they fell asleep. If other families were camping with them, somehow the parents managed to sleep in, long after their children were up and out of the tent. Michael and Kathleen felt that 5 or 6 extra kids didn't matter. It wasn't as if they weren't already feeding children. In 1989, they decided to get married, and they found St. Julian LaCroix at
St. Julian
at Grace Calvary. Kathleen had met him years earlier while working for an insurance company, but she did not know that he was a priest. Julian had come into the office wearing an Elmer Fudd hat and camos. He announced, "I shot my rabbit." After the initial confusion, Kathleen determined that after hunting, he propped his shotgun in the passenger seat, barrel on the floor, and went over a bump, and the shotgun went off, blowing a large hole in the floorboard of the car he was driving, a Volkswagen Rabbit. Anyway, Julian agreed to marry them. They then attended Grace Calvary. It was very different for Michael because he had been raised Baptist, but he dove right in, learning the services, the seasons, and etc. For Kathleen, it was easier. She had been raised Catholic, so the only thing different was that the Episcopal priest could marry. She sometimes referred to it as Catholic light, all of the sins and none of the guilt. During the pre-marriage counseling, Michael and Kathleen met weekly with Julian. On the second visit, as soon as Julian came in the room, he asked if there were any questions. Michael said, "Where do the assholes sit?" Julian immediately replied, "In the back on the left." Any other questions? Julian and Michael had a unique relationship right up until Julian's death. They both loved him. One day during the ceremony, Zoe and Annie, toddlers at the time, were sitting wrestling over a cheap bead bracelet. Of course, it broke, and what seemed to be a million beads fell trickling over the pew and onto the floor, virtually stopping the service. Julian paused a moment, then told the congregation a story of how he and his friends had smuggled in dried corn into the church in their pockets, dropping it on the floor during the service to attract mice, and how it made the same sound. He left them to draw their own conclusions as to why he might have done this, and went right on to his sermon. Their wedding ceremony was held on Friday night, August 11th, 1989. They had chosen the date because it was Kathleen's late mother's birthday. The weather was balmy for an August evening, and the church was filled to overflowing with family and friends. All of the children were part of the wedding, from flower girls and ring bearers to bridesmaids, ushers, and servers. It was beautiful. After the service, everyone went to Kathleen and Michael's house for a potluck reception. You should have seen the food. The celebration went on until about 2 in the morning, long after all the children were asleep. The next morning, they all began their new lives as a new family. Time went by, as it always does. The children grew up, went to school, accrued many achievements, and began to drive cars. Kathleen graduated from Piedmont, became a teacher. Michael continued to work at Cat Modifiers, thank God, with all the cars, playing church league softball in the spring and making first Sunday breakfast a priority. He served on the vestry twice, and he took his honor most seriously. His daughter Annie is now following in his footsteps as a vestry member right now. When the 10th anniversary of their marriage approached, Michael and Kathleen decided to renew their vows, so in 1999 they once again stood before the congregation at Grace and repeated their vows to each other. Another potluck feast followed at their home, now with nearly grown children. Time began to move faster. Suddenly the children were finishing college or working full-time and having babies and began to pop up all over the place. At first, Kathleen and Michael didn't know what to think, but once they held a grandchild, it was very clear. Grandbabies were the way to go. You can love all over them, you can let them get away with murder, give them some candy, and send them home. They cultivated this attitude for the next 10 years, and the lovely babies just kept coming. Their 20th anniversary drew near, and once again they went to renew their vows. This time, they rededicated themselves to each other on the front deck, family and friends all over the place. And lots of short people running around or in their parents' arms. Again, the food and drink were heavenly. 5 more years have passed so quickly that they hardly noticed, because a lot more luscious babies appeared. There will be another very soon now, just as you know. Kathleen and Michael's routine are simple. Michael goes to work on cars at Katniss, many of them belonging to the guests at the celebration today.
Yes.
He hauls stuff with the rollback ferry and his faithful Ford truck. You can always count on Michael for anything. He spends all of his time at home with Kathleen, unless it's a softball game, because he is the coach. Has been at least 20 years, and his boys play on the team with him. He still specializes in the first Sunday breakfast with a dedicated crew of superior helpers. The new commercial kitchen that was added during the renovation, bearing the name McDuffie's Kitchen. Michael is a rabid Braves and NASCAR fan. Really, anything on the tube, they wear uniforms and have a coach. Kathleen consoles herself with Netflix because she finds men driving or running around in circles silly. On Sunday, Michael goes to Grace with his children and grandchildren, and Kathleen prepares Sunday dinner. Family feasts and celebrations, whatever it is you celebrate that week. You can bet there are lots of birthdays. Since she is at home now, Kathleen keeps those lovely little people for their parents. She also sprouts seeds for microgreens and bakes delicious bread and sweet treats. She is so proud of her girls with their degrees and careers, and her boys with all their skills, working hard as they were taught. Kathleen will tell you that she adores her children, every single one of them, no matter what, always and forever, and that her grandbabies put her over the moon. Just look at them, you can see why. She will also tell you that her life is a blessing and a reward, being surrounded by all these children and grandchildren, knowing that they love her unconditionally. Please do not misunderstand. These 25 years have not been all unicorns and rainbows. There have been tragedies and horrors, disappointments and pain, oh so much pain. Nothing hurts more than not being able to spare your child the consequences of their choices. But without that pain, how could they know the incredible joy that comes with the triumph, successes, and endless laughter? So these are the reasons we are all here today. 25 years of life and love, multiplied by each of their children, multiplied again by their grandchildren, multiplied by all of us here today. Love that expands beyond all imagination because it is unconditional, like God's love. So they lived mostly happily after this as husband and the wife, which is what Michael calls Kathleen. One day they will be called home. Until then, there's always Sunday dinner and church league softball and first Sunday breakfast and family, always especially the family. And the author's note says, they won't be wearing the wedding dress outfit ever again because Zoe told Kathleen that her wedding dress looks like the one from the heroine wore in the movie Beetlejuice.